Hello guys, this is CD Mangaka here, giving you guys another Mangaka's thoughts. I really have no idea what to call this series other than just have it go with my GoldPer10 article. So GoldPer10 production of CD Mangaka here in the works. We're talking about Gnar, the prehistoric Yodel champion that months ago. Gosh, I can't. And his competitive success within. So with my article on GoldPer10, which you can find in the link below, I decided to go through the 4 biggest regions of competitive play, being Europe, North America, Korea, and China. Nope. And take notes on his pick rate, his win rate, his ban rate, and how many games he just flat out ignored in. And I put together a snazzy little graph. Well, that's actually not even a graph. It's a table. It's okay. It's a little mundane, but hey, it's something to kind of compare across the regions. And within my findings, the thing I want to talk about with Gnar today, interesting state that he's in comparison to all the regions, and kind of go into a first thought of why he other regions, perhaps more so than others. So Gnar is a really interesting champion. Several people have talked about this so far. I think a lot of people, casters to like GBay, great YouTube, who have discussed Gnar having an erratic power spike level. Because the thing with Gnar is that with his transformation and his passive, you don't have like these like clean power spike ceiling. Okay, so take a standard champ, cast it in. Cast it in pretty weak early phase, getting spells, you're kind of building up. Then when you hit 6, you unlock your ultimate. Power jumps up like that. And you have a really clean power spike through that, where your early game starts off kind of low and then you go on up. Gnar doesn't have that, because Gnar, as GBay himself, which I really liked his analysis on, said Gnar's power spikes is a little more up, down, up, down, up, down, because Mega Gnar is the Gnar that everyone fears. And when I say everyone, I mean like the players, teams, and games. You play around that form. You want to set it up so that when you go into the team fight, you're going to have your Mega Gnar coming out soon. It's going to last most of the fight. You don't want it to fizzle out and then your passive be on down so that you can't go Mega Gnar. You don't want to really go in just as it runs out, because it's such a great zoner with spells and his disruption in that state. It kind of makes me happy, I guess, when my own interpretation of Gnar, when he first came out, for him being like, guys, he's gonna be like a top lane, kind of bruised, because it's like, yeah, he's ranged, but that melee form has such disruption. A lot of my friends at the time, I don't know how else the community was going with this, but they were like, nah, man, it's going to be like, he's really good ADC. He's got an escape. He's got a poke with it. He's got like a W that gives him scaling, extra kind of like Vayne. I'm like, but he runs out of that form. His range is lower than all the other marksmen. Blah, 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 blah. And it's a discussion that no longer exists, because Gnar is now top lane. Gnar is not ADC. He is top lane. Called it. Yeah. Aside from that personal rant, Gnar in the top lane is an interesting dynamic with the passive. His mini Gnar form, I call it mini, is a lane bully because of range. He harasses with his boomerang throw, he gets his auto attacks off on you, and he stacks them up with succession, and then he's a little mobile furry fuzzball that avoids gank form. And then when he goes melee form, you can't really trade with him then, because that's when he gets his extra stats, such as armor, his health, I believe. A little bit of a heal out of him, and then he gets his real big disruption spells with his boulder toss, called, with his stun on his W. His jump is a little nerfed in the Mega Gnar form, but I like the way Riot set it up, where as you're trying to out of it, just to give him like a really cool timed initiation, as well as to encourage players to control the rage so well that at the start you go in with your. And then your ultimate is only available in Mega Gnar form, and that's when you flip a table as time and throw enemies around. And then you either disrupt a whole team, or you can just distance, or you throw them in a wall on their stun. And then you follow it up with your W stun. So with that kind of a kit, if Mega Gnar was the only form of Gnar, he would be so broken, because having constant access to that much disruption. But because that there's only like 15 or so seconds of Gnar being transformed in that state, Gnar's actually in a way really hard to balance. To me, at a point where he doesn't need to be balanced. And my thoughts around that are because he's a skill gated top lane champion. He's very much skill gated, which is something that we see across the regions. To talk about the regions in NA for talk about NA for a moment. I've only seen two Gnars that have really been impressive because they're good Gnars. Well, that would be Chris of Coast and Quas of top lane. Quas is just a really good top lane in general. Even though he did lose 2 games on Gnar in the second week of LCS, those are games where Piglet just got back into the team, and Piglet looked really shaky in both games. And his team was looking like they're trying to get the synergy established with their carry. Chris just looks good. Chris, I believe he played Gnar in the game where they threw against Dignitas. So had he not lost that game, that would be another win for Gnar. But Chris looks really good on Gnar. Whereas other like top laners that we come to expect great performances that have really shitty ones. Balls is just he looked awful in his first debut Gnar game. I don't know how he looked in his game against CLG when he played Gnar, but I know Cloud9 lost that and they looked like they were outplayed severely. I did notice that Balls had a huge CS lead over Zion Spartan's Rumble, but Zion Spartan had more an assist than Balls did. That's probably more like an issue of Cloud9 as right now. And then Darius' one game on Gnar, I kind of discount just because he was camped by a teammate really well. And he was able to try and get there and make plays, but TSM just wasn't able to cap. Europe, I'll admit that I don't watch Europe. Not because I'm like NA fanboy, but because I don't have the time for it. Whenever European LCS is on, I'm at work. And when I get off work, I don't want to go through all those VODs because I just don't. Not my job yet, I suppose. And as far as, however, talked with some of the GoldPer10 content creators. They said Freddy122, really good. Visiscachi of Unicorns of Love also has a pretty beast Gnar. I've been told he played it really well in the preseason. Ran against him a couple times. He hasn't in the 2 games that Unicorns of Love, won. Visiscachi was on Gnar. LPL is a similar story. I just don't have the time to invest in watching the LPL. I'm trying to keep up with it. After tweeting Karen Moser, she was kind enough to respond back to me by telling me that Cola, Flares, Flandre, there we go. Flandre and Koro were like the 3 best Gnars that she's seen in recent terms. Gave me a couple games to work out of. And Korea, as far as that region goes with Gnar, Smeb is God. You do not give Smeb Gnar. Smeb is proven to be an insane level Gnar that deserves respect in the form of a ban. In teams, pick up on that. Trace and Duke kind of compete for 2nd and 3rd place, with Trace playing an interesting Gnar because he is so passive in lane. He actually plays a bit more of a peel-based Gnar when his team goes for their poke on the Gnar Green. And it works out well, and he plays Gnar well. Duke is able to kind of just go into the back line, and he makes flashier plays and looks cooler than Trace does, but he forms a different role, and Duke is notorious for his bad lack of peel. So there's a style difference for you. But Smeb is by far just like the best Gnar. GE Tigers is a really strong team. A lot of that has to do with Smeb in the top lane. With these power spikes, one thing that I see across the region, so Korea definitely has, like, I'd say the best set of Gnars, as well as they play with Gnar the best. I don't know about LPL. I know that LPL bans Gnar, like, the most of any region, so I assume it's because they have really good Gnar players. Or they just don't want to deal with Gnar for some reason, especially since they're a huge team fighting meta. That's going on globally right now. NA seems to have the fewest. Europe's doing really well with Gnar when they let him through. They've kind of embraced him. He's reached a 100% pick ban rate in the 2nd week of the European. No idea how that goes. But it seems to me that Korea, the Asian countries, probably have a lead on Gnar, namely because they've been playing longer. LPL's hitting its 4th week this week of play, whereas NA and EU are going to their 3rd. Korea's going to be on its 5th week, and they've had a whole preseason as well to play off of, so they have like an extra 3 weeks of gameplay with Gnar. And we actually see them getting a little more confident with letting it through. Gnar was like close to 100% ban rate, and then over the weeks it's dropped. There was a huge drop from week 1 from 66% to like 33% in week 2. So I think Korean players are learning to play around Gnar. And Gnar is hovered in all regions between... NA is the worst at like 38%, and Korea has the highest at like 83, actually. Whereas China, he hovers about pretty much medium 50 range. Europe, I think it was a little low week 1, but then jumped up like 68 week 2, but that's a small pool of games. NA, I think he had a 50% win rate week 1, but then he went down as his pick rate went up. Probably because some of those games, just worse teams are picking him, and they're just losing games to better teams. That is one thing to consider. But Gnar, one thing that's interesting to note about this, and something I don't talk about in my article, is the Aurelia matchup. To me, it seems like, at least in NA, I can't speak for Europe again, that Aurelia just seems to stomp on Gnar. At least in lane. Gnar has an early advantage in lane, but Aurelias who start Flask tend to get an upper hand at level 4, and what they do is that when Mega Gnar goes down, they'll go in and trade with Mini Gnar, and they'll usually come out on top of it. Like, I remember several times, I believe it was... Dyrus' Aurelia was just trumped Balls' Gnar. I think it was Calitrol's on Aurelia, beating out Chris's Gnar. I can't recall who was who, but... I can't recall the game right now, but it seems like Aurelia's in NA just whoop on Gnars in the laning phase. Gnars are still relevant to some degree, but Aurelia's just seem to be doing really well against Gnar, which might have something to do with his lower win rate. Because in Korea, to contrast, there's a lot of Rumble players over there. Marin of SKT is exceptional Rumble player. He's well known for that. And Rumble has a harder time in the matchup against Gnar. And meanwhile, there's like no Aurelia players. I think I saw Aurelia play for the first time this last week, actually. And I don't think she was even played against Gnar. So I think it's an interesting point of discussion. It's something to look out for the next couple of weeks to see if, as NA and Europe, because those have a lot of Aurelia players. I don't know, again, about... I think there's some Aurelia players in LPL, especially since some of the Korean top laners from last season are now over there. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if there's this trend of Aurelia just haggling on Gnar and being able to beat him out so hard that Gnar just isn't able to do a whole lot. And then within these regions that play a lot of Aurelia, and if Gnar kind of slides to like a second top laner pick, Aurelia bans have been coming up, and occasionally when she's banned, Gnar does get picked. So there could be something to that there, and I'll be interesting to see if Korea starts to practice Aurelia to deal with the really good Gnars within that region in order to bring him down. That's the next point of top lane that I'm interested in seeing occur, whether or not there is this shift over to Aurelia as a form of counter pick against Gnar. I don't know how the analysis goes. Looking at a couple of guides, it seems that like Aurelia lacks an advantage until level 4, and then at that point, be able to go ham and be able to bully Gnar consistently in the laning phase if she's able to get through that without giving up a kill or an extraordinary experience lead. But then it still comes to the point where Gnar has a lot of disruption, which Aurelia can actually ignore with her tenacity in some way, so that makes her a pretty good pick against our team fighting composition. And it'll be interesting to see if teams pick that up or not. So that concludes my little bit on my Gnar spiel today. So I'm looking actually at doing a piece on Kalista just because her performance in Korea versus NA is so different. Very different experience that I think deserves support. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. This is Mangaka.